The following podcast is taken from a live broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the book club show on Inspire 105.1 FM. My name is Imrana Mahmood and I hope you have had a wonderful week so far. I am really delighted to be in the virtual studio today with a new and wonderful guest and looking and talking about her brilliant new book, which is called Dark Destiny. And the author is Yazarah. And I'm delighted because I had Yazarah with me. I actually can't remember. Maybe, I think a couple of years ago, it might be actually longer than that, talking about her first book. But this is the newest book that she has written. Is called Dark Destiny. And as always, what I will do is read a little bit of the blurb, and then we are going to go straight into talking to Yazarah about the inspiration and about her journey as a writer and kind of like conversations about themes, wider themes to do with her book as well. So the blurb is: Ray never expected being a sociopath would make her the perfect vessel for the one power that can destroy all, including its bearer. However, even after unleashing it upon her mental institution, Satara did not end their hold on her. Hero is closer to finding answers to the mysterious sickness plaguing the secret world, but the person who can place it all together inevitably drags him into the past. Every new discovery Hero makes is a threat to what humanity he has clung onto. When friends become enemies and bad blood spills between brothers, can Hero and Ray battle their own mental demons before the real ones get them? So that is a fantastic blurb to Dark Destiny by Yazarah. And I'm going to welcome Yazarah on to the show now. So Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for taking time out to speak to us and coming back on the show. I know we spoke a couple of years ago, obviously, with your first book, and that was an absolute joy to read. And so was this one. And it just so happens I was talking, I think it was on my last show that this type of genre in terms of kind of fantasy and those things aren't something I used to read maybe growing up as much. I think, for whatever reason. So it's been so great to kind of just open my own, I guess, interest in terms of different genres. It's been an absolute pleasure. So I guess my first question really would be like, what's the journey been like? Let's talk about that maybe at first in terms of the first book and now this.
Oh gosh, so definitely long, a long journey between the first book and this one. I suppose it's always a different view from, let's say, a reader's perspective of, even though, let's say it was about 4 years or so between the first and the second one being published. But the writing process started way before that. So for me, it's even longer and even more of a struggle in terms of trying to improve myself, my own writing, and improve upon my writing skills, but also the storyline itself, because I talked a little about this in our first interview with my first book, but I started writing when I was 12. So and the story basis of the story at least started at that point too, when I was 12. So having that develop the storyline, the characters, writing from a 12-year-old to a 29-year-old now is a interesting but difficult struggle within itself. Just that you as a person develop, your outlook on life develops, as well as the natural writing skills as well. But how you see things and understand things obviously are drastically change. So then your as a writer, your story then has to change, as well as the characters. So there were many times where I had to start from scratch basically to reflect that in the story.
Yeah, and I think it's so and absolutely, obviously, I can kind of understand what that journey it's been like, because like you said, obviously you started off very young, and obviously we all go through change, and we kind of have different experiences, and how much of that I guess comes into our writing. So like on that note, so what kind of inspired you? I know we would have touched upon this when I first interviewed you, but what was kind of inspired you to be in part of that journey as a writer? Maybe first, what got you into it, and what made you kind of still stay? Because you can sometimes
Yeah.
I speak to writers, and they're going through struggles or kind of writer's block, or I know it's not easy. So yeah, I'm just wondering what's that been like?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose starting with how I started, it had always been sort of more of a hobby, a pastime, really, writing little stories when I was young. Back in then, I mean, very young, so primary school age, 9, 10, 11 ages and things. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed writing stories. It started off as the typical, English homework tasks that was set for you in school. And I found that, one, I enjoyed it, but I was also good at it because other people like to hear my stories. So I think that encouragement in itself played a massive part in the enjoyment side of it. So kind of having that at a young age, friends, teachers, family being interested in your stories, and wanting to hear that, because as a child, a story is just another voice of yours. And so when someone's interested in that, they're interested as a sort of add-on, interested in you. And what child doesn't want that attention, right? So, and that was I suppose, the very early beginnings of just that interest in stories itself, and writing. And I always loved reading. Reading has always been a part of my life. I can't remember a time where I wasn't reading. Even so, that started when my mom used to read books to me, and that kind of engagement with my mom, and always taking me to the libraries and finding books for me to read, started the enjoyment of just reading and stories in general. But then writing came along, I think as an after effect of that. I think they're very closely related. And I'm not sure there's anyone who could say that they don't like reading, but they like writing. So I do think that they're very, very closely linked there. But yeah, it is I understand, because I know a lot of friends who also enjoy both reading and writing, but at different stages. Some have struggled to just get that starting point. And others have like all these wonderful ideas and even written bits and pieces, but they then struggle to either follow through or kind of put that into a solid novel story. And I've been through all those stages. I think I just started earlier with my struggles. That's all. Yeah, writer's block in it is a really, really big one for, I think, anyone, but I have definitely experiencing it even right now, because I'm still writing. And I think that how people get through writer's block and continue writing, I think everyone has their own strategies, things that work for them. But the main point is that writing has always been something personal to me. So I have many times considered giving up on not stopping writing in itself, but the idea of publishing and actually getting my book out there and all those other things that come with it, sales, etc., which I'm terrible at. But that side of I've wanted to give up many times. But writing itself, I've never thought about stopping the actual me wanting to write, whether that's a short story or continuing a novel. That process I've never wanted to stop, because that is deeply personal and has got me through a lot. So that's my own form of therapy, really. So without it, I'd be lost.
Yeah, no, and I think, that there's something there about, there's an element of, I guess, persistence, in terms of, when you're talking about self-discipline and keeping those things going. But I think I really like what you said about, it's true, because when something's personal to you, everything else is almost secondary, the who the reader might be, who the audience is, what's going to, and all of those things. And I think maybe that's sometimes a lot of us tend to forget, that actually, first and foremost, if you're doing something for yourself, whether, like you said, it's therapy or some sort of other kind of enjoyment, I guess if that is the starting intention, I assume it kind of makes it easier if you remember that, I guess,
Mm.
so then when there are some barriers or something, you might be able to overcome them, hopefully a bit better. But I wanted to just come back to what you were saying in terms of the fact that obviously your mum used to take you to the library and you used to do reading, and that obviously kind of informed the fact that you're a writer now. Is there anything like I'm wondering for parents, carers that might be listening in, where I know there's sometimes a tendency that, the STEM subjects, kind of, there's a lot of focus on, science and math, tech, etc., whatever it is.
Yeah.
And sometimes the more creative subjects are maybe less, down the hierarchy. What do you think is the benefit though? Like, because I kind of I see the fact that actually I like to push my children into more creative things because of when it comes to well-being and just general skills as well. But what is your kind of opinion on that?
Gosh, I could speak about this forever. Yes, I do passionately believe that creativity has so many benefits to mental well-being, development in general. So if we're looking at it from a childhood perspective, not to get too much into my psychology here, but that's how children learn. Through play, through creativity, through drawing, that's how children process, and that's a developmental stage for a healthy child to go through. So and arguably, actually, that helps with academic things. So, just as a very loose example, that I think some people think that if you're academic, you can't be creative, or you might not be as good as being creative, or vice versa. But that's just not true, because there's so many different learning styles. And you might find a child's better at, let's say, understanding something in a diagram form, or would like things more colorful, and they need color coded, for example, to try and remember things rather than being a block of text. And that's just another form of creativity, really. I think we're quite strangely enough, we're quite restricted in what we think is creative. So either it's you have to be lost in a fantasy world, or be drawing comics, or these that typical what we would think of being a very creative person would look like. But it's a lot more than that, and it's different for different people what speaks to them in terms of being creative. For example, I find people who can do all these technical things and build, I don't know, websites, or put together a car and things like that. That's wizardry to me. That's how how the mind thinks. But that in itself is just a different form of creativity. So I would deeply encourage that kind of exploration more than anything else. Because if you haven't tried something, one, you don't know if you like it. And you won't know if you're any good at it, and you won't know the benefits of it if you haven't tried it. So if you've done something and fair enough, it didn't click for you, that's fine. I also don't think anyone should be forced into trying being more creative than they are either. But it's that experimental stage, which is especially important for children and children's development. Though I do think it's equally as important in adulthood, but that's probably a bit more personal to my belief there, that we could be just as creative in adulthood. But that's really important in the development of a child as well, that experimenting and experimenting with being creative in different forms. And I think, being general, yes, and some people may see that as a setback if they're allowing the child to be more creative. It will distract them from the other more academic-y things, like you said, sciences. But they really, really do come hand in hand. The brain is amazing. Allah's made it so amazing that you can practically learn and do anything, and we only use 2% of that brain power. So the more we stretch it, the better for us. We're able to take in more, absorb more, do more. And what's a better way to expand your brain and challenge it than thinking of things outside of your normal everyday world, right?
Yeah.
That's what I think anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely, completely echo what you're saying, and I think and definitely it's both. You know, we're talking about, yeah, I mean, younger people, but like you said, you know, for adults, and yeah, I mean, the capacity of the brain, like you said, is literally we're using 2%, and anything that, I mean, yeah, it's kind of amazing because there is, I guess, a form of upskilling, because it could be actually there's a certain creative skill that I really enjoy and I want to improve that, or it could literally be, you know, taking up completely something new. And I know a lot of people during lockdown, you know, kind of did that, and I think that's maybe what we need to remember, how many of us really relied on the kind of artsy creative stuff to help us get us through that period of isolation.
Oh, absolutely,
you know, so so definitely, and yeah, and of course, again, it's all about developing skills we can feed into any kind of career, isn't it? So you know, definitely, I think that's true. So and obviously talking about now the book that you've written, Dark Destiny, which is kind of the second series of in what do I call it? Do I call it is it a saga? Would that be the right thing? I don't know what's the right
I'd love
term.
it if it was a saga. Maybe one day it'll become a saga.
Okay, good.
But yes, it's a fantasy series. So Dark Destiny is
Yeah.
the second book. The first one was The Sickness. Yes,
Yeah.
second book in the series.
Yeah, series. Okay, and obviously, we, like I mentioned earlier, it's looking at that kind of fantasy element of in terms of your story writing. Now, what is it in particular about this type of kind of writing and the genre that you enjoy, and you kind of, was it intentional that you wanted to pick that this is a type of like book I want to do, or was there something else that played a part in that?
So that's a very interesting question. I'm not entirely sure myself. Because I think how it maybe started is and where it comes from, I don't know, but reading books, I just enjoyed fantasy. So, and I've read many books, as you would in school, as a parent would, you know, give you all those Thomas Tank Engine books, etc. Those kind of things. I can't think right now. But right from early childhood, you know, you're kind of more given those books, aren't you? From school, from parents, they choose, right? To a certain extent. I mean, you might like the picture on the front, but I mean, it's a parent, and as an adult, that's choosing for you, right? So, and I think we all have that similar start, and we all probably read the similar books as very early childhood. But as I, you know, grew, and you could choose your own books, and you kind of have a school library and things like that. For whatever the reason is, and I don't know this myself, but I just enjoyed the more fantasy style books, and I enjoyed reading that. And I have tried other books. I, you know, just working on the theme of trying things at least once. I've tried other kind of books, crime thriller books, romance books even. I can definitely not do that. And contemporary fiction, lots and lots of different genres. And I just had that interest, and I was absorbed in the world of the fantasy. And we can put many theories into that. Escapism is definitely one of them. I always say, why do I want to read about real life tragedies and issues when I can just turn on the news? Like, things like that. I mean, again, so I'm sure there's many deeper meanings about certain things. I'm sure we can analyze my childhood in different ways. But yeah, I was very interested in the fantasy as a genre in books. So and I've always had a very active imagination. So I'm sure that very much influenced my imagination, and that's the kind of stories and little characters and things that that sort of popped up in my mind. That's just what came to mind. The stories that you do as imaginary friends, everyone had one of those at some point in their childhood, but mine sort of developed into more mental characters, and then they just happened to have, I don't know, supernatural powers or could fly and things like that. That's just, you know, when others were thinking about unicorns and princesses, I was thinking about vampires and witches and all sorts. It's just how my brain worked. So naturally, when I got into writing and interest in that, or most of my characters and the stories I thought of was more fantasy. And I loved it. As much as I loved reading it, I loved writing it. And then So why stop something you love? And I just continued there.
I know you've mentioned like vampires and stuff, but I'm still going to say it's really wonderful because I think it comes back to the thing of what we're saying in terms of I guess creative minds and whatever sparks your imagination, and obviously that's what it was happening for you, I guess, in terms of reading, and obviously it makes sense to then it was almost like an organic thing to then go into your writing. But I guess, why do you think, I mean, I don't want to generalize in terms of, maybe our own communities, but we know from our own kind of faith perspective that there are the things of the unseen that we aren't necessarily, we don't necessarily see, but we do know that they exist because, Allah, we know that Allah's creation is more than just kind of us as human beings. But I do still sometimes get a sense, though, that people tend to, I don't know, I should say, shy away from like always fantasy, or maybe we shouldn't be reading, I don't know, something like Harry Potter, let's say, because like dark magic, So how do we, I guess, reconcile that? Because we know these things exist. So surely in that sense, it should be fine to write a fictional book about it. But so I guess how does that work? Do you think?
Yeah, I totally understand. Like you said already, it quite generalized there, but we know from my own experiences, and I have too, that there are different opinions. Rightly so. People are to and how they feel about the topic in itself. And I've starting so early on, I struggled so much with this. Actually, more than a lot of other things, because I suppose, well, when you're young and you're still learning about your religion as well as the world and everything else. That's part of it. You're still learning about that. So when and you get different inputs, information, opinions from your surroundings, the people around you, and as well as culture, which is not always the same as religion. I'd like to just point out, and so I really, really did struggle with that. And I think, I don't know if I so much reconcile with it as try to understand others, myself, and religion more. So I would never say to anyone, or even to myself, a definite yes, no, or yes, you can, no, you can't, or anything like that to anyone. I think it's just like with a lot of things, it's a personal belief, experience for them, and I respect that. However, that might look to another person on the outside, it's your own inner feeling, and so I 100% respect that for others and for myself, and that I'm still just, I suppose, discovering that in myself. Even at 29, I don't have the answers for that. So on a personal level, we all were brought up with learning about our religion, right? I mean, we learn that as we develop. But honestly, for myself, I did not, how do I put this, connect so closely with my religion until I was at least 14-ish, teenage years, where I in a way found it myself, because I was struggling in my own ways with life, mental health, etc. And religion honestly saved me. Religion saved me. And I was writing at the same time, because like I said, I already started writing this at 12. So you can see how the two things in my life, religion and then writing, which saved me, saved my mental health, saved my own childhood, well, teenagehood, childhood was way past then. And they influenced each other. And that just, I don't know how I would separate them anyway. And with how my journey was. So my intention was then just to sort of inspire that kind of love for and interest in, as well as reading and writing, but for the religion as well. And what better way to do that than put into something you enjoy? Again, that's just my own opinion.
No, and I think it's definitely one of those things that when we approach any kind of, I guess, books or reading, it's the nuance in it. And I think it's also, there has to be an element for the reader that you're able to discern, in terms of what is and isn't, I guess, I don't know what to use the word, acceptable. But that's just it. We're all individuals. We're all different. And I think, I completely take on board everything that you said, because it is, at the end of the day, you're using your faith or whatever's kind of close to you to inspire, a piece of writing, which actually brings a lot of joy to a lot of people. So yeah, I think it's just, I think you've kind of encapsulated the struggle quite well, like in being kind of a writer and being obviously a writer of kind of Muslim faith, and the things that actually what we sometimes need to think about, and the burden of representation. So you're right. I think it's great to have the diversity representation, but then the burden that gets maybe placed on the artist or writer themselves can feel really, really huge. But actually, all you want to do is you just want to write something you enjoy, and kind of share it with people. So, but no, I really appreciate that you've kind of shared that, in terms of in a really honest way. So obviously we are talking about your second book, Dark Destiny, on the book club show today. We are just now going towards an ad break, so we will be back in the second half, and we're going to talk a little bit more about Yazarah's book, Dark Destiny, and hopefully we're going to have a short little reading from Yazarah as well, which I'm really, really excited about. So in the meantime, you can grab yourselves maybe some tea or coffee, and we will be back in a few moments. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, this is Atif Nawaz. Listen to Inspire FM shows in your time by heading over to inspirefm.org or listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the book club show on Inspire 105.1 FM. My name is Imrana Mahmood, and on today's show I am joined by Yazarah, and we are talking about her second book, which is called Dark Destiny. And in the first half of the show, we were talking a little bit about her inspiration and journey in becoming a writer, why she has a particular interest in the fantasy genre. And we had a really kind of interesting discussion just before we went to the break, a little bit about kind of diversity and representation when it does come to books and, the wider, publishing industry, and the importance of having that diversity, but also at the same time acknowledging that sometimes there is a burden of representation, on artists and writers. And there's sometimes a struggle of how we can reconcile, especially, I guess, as Muslim creatives, how to reconcile our faith with maybe the art subject that we're doing. So it's been really, really pleasure so far to be speaking to Yazarah. So we're going to go straight back into kind of the conversation. And what I was thinking is just sharing a really, really small quote from Yazarah's book, Dark Destiny, which is, at 16, he was part of a powerful gang that brutalized any weakness shown. And I guess, Yazarah, just bringing you back on, to what extent do you think that society programs boys to be averse to showing any kind of weakness, and what kind of impact does that have? And I guess if you can relate that in the wider context, or maybe in terms of the character in your book as well.
Yeah, I think so thinking about first of all, it might be easier just for me to start from my character, because that was influenced by society and experiences, so that they do fit in with each other. So the main character, his name's Hero, and as we spoke earlier in the show about fantasy, but actually there's a lot of real life elements in it as well, including exploitation, trauma, etc. So it's not just all fairies and fantasy creatures. They have real issues really that are woven into it as well. So that extract is part of Hero's childhood, teenagehood, and what he went through at his joining a gang. And so the idea of having to be strong and not show certain types of emotions, and to be able to deal with the situation that you're in. This is for all, I think, all genders. But I touch upon for men and boys in particular in this book with Hero's character. And I think I don't have a particular reason why, but in terms of the wider context of society, I think we've moved along and changed quite a lot from when I was young and started to write this till now, in terms of our understanding of that need to talk about our mental health and emotions, for boys especially. I think that's a good thing, that we've that's been a bit more of a campaign to for boys, men to look after their mental health, and that it is a struggle for them in different ways. But at the same time, I think there's a new struggle in terms of that there's those messages on social media and TV and things like, talk, reach out, speak about your mental health, the calm campaign, reaching out against being miserable campaign, these kind of things that are encouraging boys and men to speak out about their difficulties and when they're struggling. But I personally, from what I've seen, and I do work in mental health, but so society in itself hasn't quite caught up with that, if that makes sense. So there's a new struggle in terms of it being pulled on two ends now, in a way. So, which creates a new type of pressure. So there's that pressure of the typical man up. We recognize you might be struggling, but you'll get through it. So it's that sort of a new element to it now. So now that people are more aware, we know and have those messages that we should, take care of ourselves and for men to take care of them and boys to take care of themselves. But are we giving them that space, time, strategies to actually know how to do that? So now it's that pressure of, I know I should, but I'm not. So now I'm worse off. Then so there's that way, that kind of idea of you're telling boys and men to pay attention to themselves and other friends. I think that's part of the campaign as well, to each other. But how do you do that? No one's telling them how to do that. And the environment, society, people who not violent for also don't know how to do that. But they know they've also getting that message of that they can struggle in with their mental health as well. So it's all not getting anywhere, basically. So it's a good start. I'm not saying anything against these campaigns, but it just takes longer for society to catch up with that. So they know that they should be paying attention to these things, and that there is this thing, whatever it may be, this thing called mental health. But they haven't quite reached it yet. So it's still that struggle to then know what to do with themselves, know how to reach out, know and when, because as just to add to that quote that you said there about brutalizing weakness, and now it might not be as simple as anymore as not crying as a boy, or not giving into things, but now it's also a weakness now to need help, to reach out for that help, even though that's being encouraged. So and again, it's very complex. I would never blame just one thing or say this is just the one way that people are living with. But I'm thinking from also, when I say society, I'm thinking about, let's say, close friends, family as well, to a person maybe struggling. And I can see from that perspective too, again, caring for people myself, or from personal experience, that it can also be a struggle to see a person, whatever gender, struggling with their mental health and not knowing what to do. And because then there's pressure on them that, well, that someone's struggling now, that's because of that awareness that those messages are out there. So you should be able to help them. You should be then able to fix them or find the right help for them. And that's unreasonable to think that you can do that. But that's another kind of automatic pressure that's been put on that as an after effect of being aware. Because once you're aware, well, that means there should be some kind of action to it too. We don't know what that action is. So it's just created a more problems, newer problems. Not that I'm saying it shouldn't go in this direction, but sometimes it needs to get worse to get better. But we're in that stage right now, especially for boys and men, where it's more confusing than ever before. And I think that's what I'm trying to display in this book as well.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think that's what the beauty is of I guess, writing a book, which is looking at a particular journey of the protagonist and all the different characters, but then also mentioning those kind of deep rooted, I guess, societal problems that we have, because I guess that is part and parcel of I guess, in whether it's writing or any form of, because it becomes a form of, activism in some sense, even though that might not be the intention, you're kind of shedding light on something which is really important. And I think you've raised a really important issue. I think it does tend to happen, this is across the board with so many different things, that we are very good at, I guess, creating the labels. So we're identifying something, which of course is really important, because I guess the first step is really to identify and acknowledge. But then, but I guess it's all of the infrastructure around that we're able to really, really support people and really do and help in a way that is needed, I guess on an individual basis. And I think that step is somewhat missing. But and again, it's this particular, we were talking obviously in particular in terms of the character being a boy, but obviously it's across all genders, I guess, the issues of mental health and just any kind of societal, I guess, boxing in and pigeonholing, which obviously can be, a huge problem. But kind of obviously linked to that, I did mention in the first half that we would have the pleasure of listening to you read an extract from Dark Destiny. So if I kind of pass the floor over to you to do that would be wonderful.
Thank you. So speaking on that theme, I've got an extract from Dark Destiny, which hopefully shows a little bit more of the real side of my book. So going back into more real life issues here. So this is back in Hero's Quest. So I'll start. Hero woke up. Ryu was already gone and he hadn't bothered to make the bed either. He got up only to collapse back to the floor again. He felt weak and sluggish, drained not just of energy but emotion too. He wouldn't mind sleeping until he died. He forced himself to get up and shower. It took a long time, 3 rounds of shampoo to get the gel and hair dye out, and half a bottle of soap with as much punishingly cold water as he could bear to make him stop feeling dirty. His memory of what he'd done at the restaurant was sketchy, and somehow letting his imagination fill in the gaps was worse. He was staring into the grimy mirror with blurry eyes, but he couldn't recognize himself. Every time he caught his reflection, it felt surreal, as if looking through a portal at someone else in a different dimension. He was so gaunt he could count his ribs. His skin was pale and he had huge bags under his eyes, making his bloodshot brown eyes look dull. This wasn't him, his mind told himself. It was the only way it could trick Hero into carrying on. He looked away from the mirror in disgust. How could anyone want him? He was the perfect example of how cosmetics and the right clothes and hairstyle could transform a person. Hero made his way downstairs in a daze. Like always, he kept his head down and ignored the people coming and going around him. The den was always filled with some kind of activity, but none concerned Hero. Hero haunted the kitchen, but finding nothing, he mechanically ate cereal with water. He'd have killed to have some milk just once. That was the first thing he'd buy if he ever got to keep any of the money he earned for the gang. Hero didn't know what to say to Shane. Hero knew his place in the gang now. At first, he really thought they'd needed him as much as he needed them. They'd made it seem as if everyone looked out for each other, but he'd quickly learned the hard, brutal way that the only thing they valued about him was what he could do for them. When the gang leaders soon realized he was only useful for one thing, that's where he'd stayed. That's just a little extract about the kind of the real issue that my character, Hero here, went through as a teenager, and that's when he was joining a gang.
Yeah, and again, it's that thing of being able to touch upon, again, a really important aspect, which is obviously very much rooted in reality as well. Because when we talk about, young people trying to find that sense of belonging and end up in situations where maybe they do end up part of, a gang, and how that all plays out. And I think it was really interesting when you were talking, in that extract, about aesthetics and how we can mold ourselves into a certain way by maybe how we choose to look or dress, or and the idea is so powerful. The idea you're looking yourself in a mirror, and what you see maybe compared to the perception that other people have of you. So there's a lot that you've touched upon, which is great that you kind of share that extract. I guess when you were, maybe delving into, again, more of a personal question. So when you were writing that kind of extract, do you remember what it was that you were maybe thinking, I guess, in your own mind, and how, what you were trying to convey, and what message in that particular extract would you hope for the reader to take away?
So first of all, I think it's the way I wrote it first. It was I wrote Heroes Past separate from the main storyline, and then I molded it in, and I fitted in those sort of flashback scenes with the rest of the book. So when I was writing it for him, it was just his whole story beginning to sort of end of that part of his life. So that was sort of, let's say, the middle-ish of his childhood, well, teenagehood life. And so what I was thinking at this time, if I remember correctly, was more about the realization. So there's a bit before this where he's kind of roped in for different reasons. He's found himself in the situation and he's just going along with things. But here you might see from when he's the part where he's talking about how he looks in the mirror, but also about knowing his place now, understanding what his position is in the gang, compared to what he'd actually first thought, that he was, they needed them as much as he needed them, that kind of feeling. So I this one, I was thinking about, I suppose, Hero as a character developing one with his age and his experience and his understanding of what is going on for him. So I wanted to show, as well as sort of the being a gang is wrong and all those, typical messages everyone already knows about. I wanted to show how easy and it can be to unknowingly get yourself into things. So for Hero, he didn't intend to, yes, I'm going to join a gang and do this and this and this and be powerful, whatever. He didn't intend for that to happen. He didn't want himself to be in the position that he's in right now. So this is him realizing that what basically happened to him and how it happened in a very short extract there. You can see. So I wanted to show, I suppose, in this whole flashback, not just this one part, but his whole backstory about his side of things, and so that so hopefully the readers can relate to anyone, really, kind of how it's a lot more complex than suddenly, I don't know, finding yourself in a bad situation, gang or otherwise. That's just because of this book, but there's so many other situations you can find yourself in, and easy to then blame the victim. So why did you go there? Why did you, how did you end up there? How did you not know? Did you, it's easy to think about those kind of things and how a person or a character could have avoided it. And I really wanted to show that side where actually it's more complex and emotional, and the emotional blackmail that he kind of went through before this, where he felt like he was part of something at home. He felt like he belonged. It wasn't just a I don't know, he wanted money or something like that and just wanted to earn for money. It was more complex than maybe how we view certain aspects of life. So yeah, I think what I was thinking about here was I really wanted to show Hero's mentality of how he ended up there, and how he sees it now, and that kind of realization that he hadn't had before.
Yeah, and I think it's what you've done, I think, even within that extract, and is that idea of kind of the vulnerability, right, that we all have, and obviously you've shown it through the character of Hero throughout the book. And I think, again, it's hopefully one of those things that when people of different ages read it, there might be a sense of something which is relatable there, because and I think it's important that you said it doesn't matter what the context is. So it could be ended up in a gang, or it could be various other things, and how many of us can probably relate to, actually, I know when I was in this situation how it happened. And again, it's really kind of delving deeper and showing, I guess, some sort of compassion to people, because obviously we don't know the whole journey. It's different when you're reading character in a book, because the great thing is you see the character arc and you see everything that's kind of taking place. So no, I think it's great. And I think it's been really interesting kind of getting your own perspective on something that you've written yourself, because sometimes as a reader you might not know the thought process that was going into it. I wonder whether you'd be able to share maybe another short extract, just so I guess we could kind of have that conversation in terms of what your thinking was and maybe how the reader might take it.
Yeah. Okay. There's I suppose in general I touch on quite a few different themes, let's say, and I think just for the sake of the not losing any of our audiences and introducing too many characters, if that's right with you, maybe sticking with just reading about Hero.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not to say that I've got plenty of other.
Yeah, of course. No, I know we don't want to give too much away. Absolutely, no, go for it.
But also not to confuse them too much in terms
of course.
Hero's the main character, and if we're that kind of journey, it just makes sense to sort of see a little bit more of that. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
So this actually happens surprisingly earlier than the stuff I just read. But this is I've chosen this part because it's introducing. So it's still a flashback. It's still when he's a teenager. It's still at that point. But I've introduced the first time introduced that fantasy element to that particular storyline. Yeah. So before that, it's just normal as in no fantasy kind of featured in his childhood flashbacks. So far, everyone's human, and this is how that came about. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hiro had no idea at the time that she wasn't a hallucination caused by his recent trip. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Bright white light enveloped her. So at first, he just saw a floating face and long thread-like hair. When the light died away, he gasped. The creature was almost translucent, like a ghost. Something glinted behind her. He sat up in bed, transfixed. He could see better now. Sharp glass feathers cut out her back. What are you? He breathed. Tenchi? He reached out in wonder, expecting to cut his fingertips or for her to fade away like an image in water. Her laugh was like glass clinking. I can be whatever you want me to be. I can take the despair away. She rose up, strangely silent, hovering above him. He leaned down, bracing his arms behind him. How? He breathed in awe. Whatever I do, it only lasts a moment, and then the dream shatters, and I'm worse off than when I started. He looked away, not wanting something so beautiful and pure to see him like this, not wanting to see himself reflected in her mirror wings. She shook her head. I'm better than any drug. I can fill up this emptiness inside you. You can really do that? He couldn't help being suspicious. He'd had enough of false promises and double-edged favors. She placed one slim hand over his heart. It was ice cold, but then warmth spread through him from within. Yes, I will take away all the pain and the loneliness, if that's what you want. Hiro hesitated, and she took her hand away. Instantly, gripping pain and bottomless depression renewed its invasion of his heart. Yes, he said quickly, wanting it to go away by any means. Is this your wish? She asked. Yes, he answered with more conviction this time. Know that in return I shall have your body. He didn't hesitate. His body hadn't been his own for years. Yes, he said for the final time. Her wings enveloped him in a frenzy of pleasure pain, stabbed into him. He threw his head back and his spine bowed. He would have collapsed if the creature hadn't been holding on to him. The creature placed him back onto the bed gently. He felt strangely numb, and it wasn't the drugs. He fell asleep. When Hiro woke up in the late afternoon, his hopes and dreams shattered. He was in the same small, dirty room. White dust lay at the table, and more customers awaited him.
That was so good to hear. Because it's different. It's different when you're reading it yourself. When you kind of hear the author reading themselves, it's different. It's different and much. It's just it's a brilliant experience. So thank you for kind of indulging me. What I want to do is, I know we're kind of approaching the end of the show, and it's been obviously wonderful talking about Dark Destiny, which is obviously the second part of this fantasy series. The first was obviously The Sickness. I know that you also have a blog that you're writing. So I wonder whether we kind of wrap up the show where you can talk a little bit about that and how, if anyone wants to get in touch with you or follow your work, what might be the best way?
Sure, thanks. Yes, I literally just, this blog went live 2 days ago. I'm very slow at the moment, so I made it overnight, and decided and made it overnight. So the blog is, you can find it under my author name, basically www.yazarah.com. And it's quite straightforward, but it's not your typical kind of author page. There's only a small part about my books. I won't pester you too much about buying those. But it's a blog that mixes the very topics that we talked about today: fantasy, creativity more than anything else, creativity and mental health. So I work in the NHS. I'm a mental health practitioner. I work with children and adolescents. I'm a trained counsellor, but I also have personal experience of myself and family members dealing with mental health, caring for them, as well as traumas, etc. Let's not go into the pity party, but there's so many things from personal experience as well as just my job that I thought I could use to help others. So this blog is to kind of sort of, let's say, advice, but my own experience, and hopefully people can get inspired and also ask for any tips from me as well through the contacts page, where we can talk about how to use different forms of creativity, not just writing, but different forms of creativity to help with mental health, and to cope and to get by, and to deal with that struggle, but also feel like there's that community that understands, and to just be supportive of each other, really. And I just wanted to start that kind of community base on my website. So again, it's just under my author name, www.yazarah.com, and just started it. So really about my experiences, but not just all the bad stuff, but how I got through it as well, and things that maybe others hopefully can use as well.
Yeah, no, and it's wonderful that you're kind of able to share that platform, and obviously it's probably the perfect way, obviously, to get in touch with you. And of course, we've been talking about Dark Destiny today, which obviously people can purchase. I assume mainly from Amazon and different. What might be the best way for them to purchase?
Yes. Absolutely. So both my books, The Sickness and Dark Destiny, are on Amazon, but you can also buy them directly from my publisher's page, which is austinmacaulay.com. But yeah, if you search for it, it's in most online bookshops, but probably Amazon's the easiest one to just go with. And I'm on Goodreads as well, so you can follow me on there and put that on your to be read list.
Excellent. It's been an absolute joy talking to you, Yazarah. Thank you so much for your time today, and I wish you the luck, obviously best of luck with everything else that you're working on as well, inshallah, and hopefully we will have you back in the near future, and in the meantime, listen, so I will be back inshallah in a couple of weeks with a new book and a new guest. In the meantime, please keep us in your du'as. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. Why not tune in to our live stream at inspirefm.org and follow and subscribe to our social media platforms at Inspire FM Luton.